today's program. Additionally, thank you to the OU professional and lay leadership, in particular, Mr. Moish Bain, Mr. Alan Fagan, Rabbi Moshe Hauer, Rabbi David Pardo, and Rabbi Adir Posey for their unwavering commitment to the Jewish people. Today's presentation is dedicated as a refuah shalema for a complete recovery for all of those impacted by COVID-19 or by any illness, whether it be physical, emotional, or mental, and for all of those affected financially. May Hashem please send a healing for all of those who need it, safeguard and protect all of us, all of his people and creations, and provide the financial stability for those in need. We would also like to extend our blessings for all of those on the front lines combating this illness and thank them for all that they are doing for the betterment of mankind. On behalf of the OU, it is my great honor to introduce three very special rabbis, each of whom I feel a great and personal connection with. I was truly blessed and fortunate to grow up in Rabbi Berel Wein's community of Suffern, New York, where in those early years, he played a large role in my Jewish development, as well as my desire to devote my life to Jewish communal work. Currently, Rabbi Wein is the director of the Destiny Foundation, in addition to being the Rav of Beit Knesset Hanassi in Jerusalem. Our second panelist, Rabbi Dr. J.J. Schacter, University Professor of Jewish History and Jewish Thought at Yeshiva University, and I were colleagues at YU Center of the Jewish Future a decade ago, where Rabbi Dr. Schacter is the senior scholar, and like all of you watching today, I was and continue to be impacted by his great wisdom, sensitivity, and leadership. Moderating today's panel, Rabbi Stephen Weil is the Senior Managing Director of the Orthodox Union. For many years now, he and I have had the great fortune of working together, in particular, our many trips visiting Jewish towns in the backcountry of America's South, and I am constantly in awe of his brilliance, warmth, and timely perspectives on all matters. So thank you for joining us, and now it is my distinct honor to welcome Rabbi Berel Wein, Rabbi Dr. J.J. Schacter, and Rabbi Stephen Weil, and thank them in advance for being a part of today's program and for all that they do on behalf of Am Yisrael. And with that, I pass the baton to Rabbi Weil.
Naftali, thank you very much. On behalf of all of us that are learning and listening today, we want to thank you, Naftali, and Rabbi Phil Karish for putting this program together, as well as all of the good people at the OU Synagogue Services and our community engagement. Today, we have two giants. Rabbi Berel Wein has taken a generation, our generation, and he's taken us by the hand in understanding the Masorah, mentoring us, giving us a context of whether it's Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi, a context of Rabbi Akiva, or whether it's the great Achronim, to see the Masorah in the context of Jewish history, the Jewish world. Rabbi Berel Wein, as you know, was a great Rosh Yeshiva. Rabbi Berel Wein was one of the top synagogue rabbis in America for many decades. But his legacy goes above and beyond his yeshiva, goes above and beyond his shul. And he shaped rabbis, educators, and the laity of the Jewish world, both here and in Israel. And Rabbi J.J. Schacter, if there's one person over the last 3 decades that has impacted the American rabbinate and American communities, it's been Rabbi Schacter, both as the head of the Soloveitchik Institute in Boston and in his role at Yeshiva University. Rabbi Schacter has been with communities through their greatest challenges and through their greatest joys. He's a friend, he's a mentor to all, and he's an educator par excellence. He has lifted the standard of what it means for a rabbi to be an educator, a thoughtful educator, through many seminars that he's been giving over the last 20-some years, impacting the American Canadian rabbinate. And it's an honor to have these two great Jewish thinkers and these two great Jewish personalities with us. We're going to be asking 2 areas to Rabbi Wein and Rabbi Schacter. The first area we're going to ask them is this: as historians and as thoughtful Jews, if they could share with us models, be they rabbinic models or lay Jewish models, of leaders who have dealt with tragedies in their community. It could be a Jewish tragedy or it could be a global tragedy, and how those tragedies impacted those communities. But to a much greater idea is how those leaders nurtured, mentored, and took those communities forward in the aftermath of those tragedies. If we could turn first to Rabbi Wein to share with us a number of models.
I'm so overawed by the introduction that I have almost nothing left to say. But Jewish history is at one and the same time universal and very particular. And we often concentrate on the particular and don't put it in the backdrop of the universal. And here we have a situation which is completely universal. The coronavirus does not really affect us per se. It affects all humanity. Nevertheless, we are faced with the challenges of what it has done to us in a particular vein as well. So I would make a general comment and then a few particular instances. I'm not a prophet. I'm not even a wise man, but I am an old man. And that has certain advantages, believe it or not. Gives you a certain perspective. And what is clear to me is that whatever the Jewish world will look like a year from now, 5 years from now, even farther out, 50 years from now, and I'm speaking about the Orthodox Jewish world basically, because I think, tragically speaking, that's just about the only Jewish world that's going to be left. It'll be far different than what we were accustomed to. All of history shows us that. When the Second Temple was destroyed, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and the Tanoim, his students, created a new world. Not a new Judaism, but a new format that was not dependent upon national statehood. It was not dependent upon temple worship or sacrificial worship, but they created a Jewish world that was to last for millennia. And they rose to the challenge by so doing. And they did so with great trepidation. They weren't hasty. The Talmud teaches us that when Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was about to depart this world, and his students inquired of him, "What do you see?" I mean, what, you know, he's on the verge of the world to come. So he said, "I see before me there are two pathways. One is to eternal glory and paradise, and the other is not. And I don't know where I'm going." So I was always amazed. What do you mean he doesn't know where he was going? He saved the Jewish people. We're going to build the Jewish people through Torah now. We don't have a state. We don't have an army. We don't have a government. But we're going to be eternal. We're going to build yeshivas. We're going to create a Talmud. What do you mean I don't know where I'm going? The answer is that when we come to a decision, we have to do so wholeheartedly. But in the back of our mind, the doubt always remains. Was that the right decision? In terms of history, many times we make a short-term decision that looks brilliant, and a few years later, it looks stupid. So the Jewish world changed radically. But in that change, which was within always the bounds of tradition and halacha, the Jewish world was saved. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai saved us. In 1648 and 1649, Gzeirus Tach V'Tat, the Ashkenazic world was pretty much destroyed. Its whole infrastructure in Poland and Lithuania was, in the Ukraine, was upset. Great rabbis were slaughtered. Terrible. There's the great Sefer Yevein Amatzula from Reb Nosson Hanover that describes the atrocities of the time. You know, it's not the Holocaust in terms of numbers, but it's, relatively speaking, it's a Holocaust. How did the Jewish people respond to that? How did the leaders respond? So a section of the Jewish people, and it has to be said, went away. They went to enlightenment, they went to reform, they went to conversion, they went to intermarriage, they went away. They said there's no hope in remaining Jewish. Forget it. But the revitalization of the Jewish people came within a century with the great Hasidic movement. That was a radical revolution. But it has to be seen in retrospect that it was pretty much the salvation of the Jewish people. And in the Lithuanian world, also a century away, under the influence of the Gaon of Vilna, the yeshiva system was created, which did not exist before then. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter created the Musar movement, which, even though it did not have the longevity that perhaps it was entitled to, but for its time was the bastion of Jewish ethics and morals, and produced the Jewish leadership and was the backbone of the yeshiva. And in our time, after the Holocaust, I mean, I remember it, I think I'm the only one here that really was of age then. But I remember when the, Rabbi Schachter's father of blessed memory, who saved so many Jews and who went to the camps and who suffered with them and who strengthened them and who built them. I remember what those Jews looked like when they limped into Chicago. I remember they in Yiddish, they say, zerbrochene Menschen, absolutely broken people, broken physically, morally, spiritually. And there were a few people that were not broken, even though they had suffered enormously. So again, whether we look at the Satmar Rebbe, or we look at the Gloisenberger Rebbe, or we look at Rabbi Aaron Kotler, or we look at those that were in America, Dr. Belkin and Rabbi Soloveitchik, and then the Lubavitcher Rebbe, all of these are different people. They're not the same. And they're all, on the surface, radically different. But they were determined to rebuild the Jewish people. And in rebuilding the Jewish people, it requires new tactics, perhaps a different outlook on things, different emphasis. The day school movement began right after the Holocaust. The day school movement saved American Jewry, saved Orthodoxy here. We all went to public school. They didn't have a chance. So the response will be undoubtedly positive and different. But I'm convinced that what was, it's not exactly going to be the way it's going to be. And we should not be afraid of that. We should welcome it. We should be creative. We should be innovative. It could very well be that Zoom was invented to promulgate Torah, not just to have family chats. And so that's my assessment of the situation, that somehow great things are in store for us, but that we have to rise to the occasion to make them happen. And we will need people. It's always people. It's Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, it's the Baal Shem Tov, it's Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, it's Rabbi Chaim Volozhiner, it's Rabbi Aaron Kotler, it's the Ponevezh Rov, and it's the state of Israel. They're all people. And people have the ability to rise to the occasion. I want to just say on a personal note that it's such an honor and pleasure for me to be with, for purposes of transparency, my relative, Rabbi Dr. J.J. Schacter, Rabbi Akiva, and it's just really, it's heartwarming even just to see you on the Zoom. And Baruch Hashem, we should have nachas from our families together. Thanks.
Rabbi Wein, thank you. Rabbi Schacter.
It is for me an enormous honor and privilege to be able to share this virtual podium with Rabbi Wein and with Rabbi Weil. Rabbi Wein just mentioned that it's all about people, and he listed a whole number of people, a whole group of people who were instrumental in maintaining the commitment that we have to a vital Jewish tradition. And in the 20th and into the 21st century, I would add Rabbi Berel Wein to that list as someone who himself has had such an incredible impact on so many others. I may be a shtickle as you let out the Pasal Edus because I'm a shtickle Karev, but let's leave aside my Psul Edus because it is utterly irrelevant and certainly doesn't bias me whatsoever in this context. Rabbi Weil has been a very distinguished pulpit rabbi in a number of communities, and in the last number of years has moved into a national spotlight where he has distinguished himself for his learning, for his strategic thinking, and for your leadership, Rabbi Weil, and it's a privilege and an honor to be here together with you as well. I want to thank Rabbi David Pardo for calling me to invite me, Naftali Herman and Rabbi Karish for their part in this program, and Poschen Bechvod Achsanya Bigadol to thank the Orthodox Union, to Moshe Bain and Alan Fagin, and to wish a Baruch Haba to Reb Moshe Hauer, to thank Reb Moshe and Reb Alan for long service, which I have no doubt will continue, and look forward to Rabbi Hauer's service in Emir Hashem the years and decades ahead. I also want to totally acknowledge what Naftali said at the beginning, how this is being dedicated for a refuah shalema b'gufu b'nefesh to those who are hurting, and also to be able to grant Emir Hashem the brachas of the Rabbeinu Shalom for financial prosperity and help for those who are hurting in that area. Rabbi Wein mentioned Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and that's certainly the point of departure when it comes to the Churban. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Ten Liavna v'Chachamer, the Gemara in Gittin on Daf Nun Vav Amid Beis, Shushilta, the Rabban Gamliel, Asvasa, the Messiah, Leila Rabbi Tzadok. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was interested in the religious revitalization, in the political revitalization, in the personal. All three of them represent three different categories. But I want to move to the next generation. I want to move to Rabbi Akiva. And we'll see in a moment how Rabbi Akiva is actually very much, as I'm sure you know, Me'nyana Dioma now, as we're counting down to Lag BaOmer, and we're in the middle of Sfiras HaOmer. So when we think about a Jew who was looking out at a world of desolation and devastation, somebody who beheld a culture that was so different than what had originally been, a culture that was bereft of a Beis HaMikdash, a culture that was trying to face some kind of a bar kochba, some kind of a hope, and have their hopes dashed. Rabbi Akiva is looking at a time of great challenge and of great concern. And the famous Gemara at the end of Masaches Makos, where he's walking with Rabban Gamliel and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Yoshua, And they come and they see the shul, Sheyotzimi Beis Kodesh HaKadoshim, and they're all upset. And he begins to laugh. And why are you laughing? They ask him. Obviously, there's no reason here to be happy. And he explains the reason. And at the end, they respond and they recognize and they acknowledge Akiva Nichamtanu, Akiva Nichamtanu. Rabbi Akiva facing a most horrific scenario and seen in front of him, it can't get worse than that. Those who could have remembered the Beis Hamikdash Bibinyana and now see Shuolim walking around where a Zar HaKarev Yumas, where a Kohen Gadol could only go one day a year, and now it's in Ganzen Hefker, was able to give Nachama. He is the person who is the Menachem. He is the person who has hope, who has optimism, and who provides resilience. The Gemara in Maseches Psachim tells us something else about Rabbi Akiva. I think Rabbi Akiva is really a very important figure for us to focus on. I had long ago noticed a very interesting machlekes in the Mishnah, Kuf Tezayin Amid Beis, that we're actually very familiar with because it's incorporated into our Pesach Haggadah. The Gemara here, the Mishnah here tells us the whole shalsheles that we have included into the Haggadah. Lefichach anachnu chayavim lahodos and kol shelayomer shloshet dvarim elu b'Pesach. All this is taken from this Mishnah, and then the Mishnah says after we say Hallel v'chosem b'geula. Rabbi Tarfon Omer asher go'alonu v'golas avosenu miMitzrayim v'lo hayachosem. V'lo hayachosem. How do you end this? How do you end the first part of the Haggadah? Asher go'alonu v'golas avosenu miMitzrayim. It's all about the past. It's all about what happened, and there is no chasima. Rabbi Akiva Omer continues the Mishnah. No, we're not ready to finish yet. No, this is not the end. This is not the conclusion. Rabbi Akiva Omer Kein Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avosenu Yagienu l'Moadim v'Legor Macherim Habam l'Korasenu l'Shalom Smeichim b'Vinyan Irecha v'Sosim b'Avodosecha. We have a future. There's going to be good. It's going to be Sosim v'Simcha. Baruch Atah Hashem, we are Chosem. Goal Yisrael, not just in the past. Rabbi Tarfon stopped in the past and he froze. Rabbi Akiva said, no, look at the future. Kein Hashem that said, Nach Zayin, Simchis and Naches, and said, Nach Zayin, Nocham Ola Beis HaMikdash. This is Akiva Nichamtanu. This is Akiva Nichamtanu. And what do we say in the Haggadah? We say in the Haggadah, the Maisa of all these 5 rabbis, some of whom the names I just mentioned, who come to Rabbi Akiva, and all of them are sitting, and they're sitting in Bnei Brak. And why are they in Bnei Brak? Maisa Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Shur, Rabbi Lezer, Rabbi Akiva, Tarfon. Why are they in Bnei Brak? Because the Tosefta says in Masachet Shabbos that Rabbi Akiva lived in Bnei Brak. All these wonderful Weil, Tyre, Gedolei Yisrael, they're looking out at a Churban. They can remember, they heard stories when they were younger. They remembered there was a Beis HaMikdash, and now Nebuch Vadorben. In ganzen Chorev geworden. And now it's Pesach. And now it's Shalosh Regalim. And now it's Aliyah L'Regel. And now it's a Korban Pesach and garnished. What do we have? Nothing. What are we going to do? We're in ganzen Gehargit. Oh, they say, I know where we're going to go. We're going to go to Bnei Brak. Rabbi Akiva lived in Bnei Brak. If we want Nechama, if we want optimism, we're going to go to the Baal HaOptimism. We're going to go to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is the one who's going to provide optimism for us. And listen to the way I want to touch up the rest of this mimer. And we all know what the ending is. The Talmidim came to the great Gedolim who are sitting a whole night, and the Talmidim walk in, and it's already in the morning, and they say, Rabbi Seinu, listen to my pshat. I can't imagine it's my pshat. I must have seen it somewhere. And they're focusing on Geula. And they're getting a shtickle nechama. And they're getting a shtickle optimism. Until their students walked in, they're shlogen, they're hargit, the students are depressed, the students are sad, the students are overwhelmed. Was it Zayin Nebuch? Teach us. V'amru lahem Rabbi Seinu. So the Rabbi Seinu said to them, the rabbis, our teachers said to their Talmidim, they were the ones who said, Kindalach, don't worry. Higiazman kriyashma shel shachris. It's getting light outside. The darkness is behind us. Don't worry, there'll be a future. It's not over yet. No, Kain Hashem Elokeinu Yagienu. There's going to be a future. I mean, this is, I think, an interesting pshat. It's not the pshat, but this is how I interpret it. Achebot Talmideim Gehargit. V'omer lahem Rabbi Seinu. So in response to their depression, the Rabbi Seinu said to them, Kinderlach, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. There's light. Kriyash Mashal Shachris. The Shachris is coming, which brings me to Rabbi Akiva Me'anyana Diyoma, the Gemara in Yevama Samach Beis. Famous Gemara. This is probably the most familiar Gemara that is quoted, certainly during this time. Baboker Zara Zarecho L'Erev Al Tanach Yodcha. So the Gemara says that he had 12,000 students, 12,000 pairs of students, and they all died. Shnei Maser Elef Zugim Talmidim Aylo Rabbi Akiva V'chulo Meisa B'Perek Echad. So if you were a Rebbe of 24,000 Talmidim, Rachmana Litzlan, and they all died, you'd hang up your skates. You'd go home. You'd be finished. It's over. What's going to be 24,000 Talmidim? And what does Rabbi Akiva say? No. He picks up the pieces. Rabbi Akiva says, V'haya ha'olam shameim, Achaba Rabbi Akiva eitzal Rabbi Seinu shebedorom. He finds 5 more Talmidim. He starts all over again. He had a besmedrish, jam-packed, ungestopped, Iber and cup, 24,000 Talmidim. And then he finds 5 more. He's sitting around a shtickle table somewhere in somebody's backyard, around a little card table, and he has his 5 Talmidim, and he teaches them, V'heim, concludes the Gemara. We are alive today because Rabbi Akiva didn't give up, because Rabbi Akiva is nichamtanu, because Rabbi Akiva lived in Bnei Brak and they all came to him. Because Rabbi Akiva said, no, I'm not going to stop, like Reb Tarfon says in the past. I'm going to focus also on the future. I want to add something, if I may, take another moment. Rabbi Weil, is it okay if I take another moment?
Please do.
Thank you. I want to thank Rabbi Wein very much for invoking the memory of Avi Mori Zachronu Livracha, of my father, who I know. Rabbi Wein had enormous respect for you. Over the years, you interacted in many different ways, and you were always at the top of his group of rabbis for whom he had an enormous amount of respect. And I want to use him as an example of resilience in the face of tragedy. I want to go to the Shoah. And my father, Zacharinu Livracha, was poised in a remarkable moment in Jewish history. Just last month was the 75th anniversary of his coming into the Buchenwald concentration camp on April 11th, 1945. And in Rabbi Lau's book, he tells really a very gripping story, and that story is very well known. But I want to share a story from another book, from somebody who is less well known, certainly within our community. And this man's name is Martin Greenfield. Martin Greenfield is known in the world of fashion as the tailor for all of the presidents. He has somehow, this Green Yid came to America and was able to find a way how to get himself into the White House from the beginning. And every single president, he published a book called Measure of a Man. He has a picture with every single president. And in this book, he tells the following story. I want to share this vignette about my father, and with this, I will conclude this part of the program. So my father officiated at a tefillah in Buchenwald. It's a very, very iconic, famous picture. It was in the New York Times for his obituary when he was nifter in 2013. If you go to Yad Vashem, it's a huge wall that takes up maybe 30 feet by 40 feet of this picture. It's a big suffix exactly when it was. Some people thought it was Pesach Sheni this past Friday. A lot of people were talking about that picture. It's Mamish 75th anniversary of Pesach Sheni, but some say it was on a Friday night. And this Martin Greenfield was in Buchenwald, and my father liberated him. And he goes to this tefillah and he describes it. There was singing, reciting of blessings, prayer, weeping. It was moving. And the next day, he writes how my father was milling around and he met him and he spoke to him in Yiddish. And then Martin writes the following: I asked Rabbi Schacter. Rabbi, I attended your service last night. It was very beautiful. But may I please ask you a question? Of course, he said. Rabbi, I must know, where was God? Where was God? He stood still and silent. Look what happened, I pleaded. Where was God? Where? Quote, there are no answers to certain questions, he said, staring off in the distance. That is a question for which there is no answer. I lowered my head and I cried. Rabbi Schacter wrapped his arms around me and held me. Fast forward 40 years, it's now 1985. Fast forward about 150 pages in the book. In 1985 was the groundbreaking for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. Martin Greenfield is a prominent survivor. He's invited to come to the ceremony. My father was invited to speak at the ceremony. He's sitting in the audience. During the ceremony, he writes, an old rabbi got up to make some remarks. I'll be meichelim that he called my father an old rabbi. An old rabbi got up
The best
to make some
kind.
remarks. His face looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. I know that rabbi from somewhere, I whispered to my wife. The rabbi continued speaking. He explained that he had witnessed the Nazi atrocities of the Holocaust firsthand as a chaplain in the Third Army, which liberated Buchenwald. No way, I thought, can't be him. And then, as if God himself were winking down at me, the rabbi told the story that I knew well. After the liberation, he recounted a young boy had asked him a question he could not answer. Where was God? It's him, I said excitedly to Arlene. After the ceremony, I found a rabbi. Rabbi Schacter, my name is Martin Greenfield. I was in Buchenwald. I was the little boy who asked you that question. Rabbi Herschel Schacter told me he lived in the Bronx. We stayed in touch until his death in 2013. Every time we visited, no matter the occasion, we relived the story together. But standing there at the Holocaust Museum dedication, which turned into a Buchenwald reunion, with tears streaming down our faces, all we could do was hold on to each other. I didn't want to let go of him. He didn't want to let go either. To experience once again that connection, to stand with the man who had held me as a boy when my spirit had been shattered by the Nazis and their lust for death and darkness, I felt as though I'd been kissed by an angel. When we talk about people who witnessed horror, I have no idea. I can't even imagine what it is that my father saw when he came in, and he was a liberator. What the survivors had to go through. We think about people who made a difference. And so for now, I would focus on Rabbi Akiva. In ancient times, I would want to take the personal prerogative and privilege. I feel like it was a matir by the fact that Rabbi Wein mentioned him, that I could speak a little bit about my own father. When you are confronted with catastrophe, so we have to do something, we have to move. We can't just fold over, but we have to try to create, we have to try to be mechazik. In Tach V'Tat, Rabbi Wein mentioned Tach V'Tat, and Tach V'Tat, there was tremendous amount of refugees, an enormous amount of refugees. And the Jewish community at that time went into high gear and helped personally. People brought refugees into their houses. Local communities helped. Nations helped. It was a transnational effort. The refugees went to Cairo. The refugees were sold into slavery in Istanbul. And the Jewish people rallied around to help. Just on Friday, I received in the mail a book that I bring to your attention. It's called Rescue the Surviving Souls, the Great Jewish Refugee Crisis of the 17th Century by a professor at Brown University. It's an excellent book, and he describes the heroic efforts of the Jewish people to help those in need. That's also something we need to be doing now. At some point, we'll get to the theological questions, but they're practical questions. So Lamaisa, what am I going to do? So we have to help. Those of us who are blessed to be in a position to help, we need a help, to be mechazik those who need the help, whether it's a refuah, whether it's financial help, to not just be passive, but to jump in and to exercise leadership and to be zocher with the exercising of our leadership, our personal, each one of us, and our collective leadership, we should be zocheh to be able to do at least what we can to try to minimize the intensity and the power and the catastrophe that is now overcoming us. By us, I mean, as Rabbi Wein mentioned, not just the Jewish people, but the entire world.
Rabbi Schacter, I would like to, since you did the story so masterfully, I'd like to add one more story, which I'm a personal witness to. And this story's been repeated many times by others, not just by me. But I'm the Baldover. In 1946, Rav Herzog, Zecher Tzadik Levrocha, who was then the chief rabbi of what was then Palestine. You know, do you remember, Rabbi Schacter, that we were once the Palestinians? I remember when I went to public school, the Shkotzim used to holler, "Go back to Palestine." But I don't know how we lost the title of being the Palestinians. But anyway, Rav Herzog came to Chicago. He came on behalf of the Vada Hatzolah, the refugees, etc. And I remember I was before Bar Mitzvah, but my father took me to the yeshiva, and Rav Herzog delivered a 45-minute shiur in Yiddish. I even remember the Indian named Shliach Ledvar Avera, the taste was there. And I was so impressed by his Hadras Ponim. You know, he was such an aristocratic, rabbinic figure. And then when he finished, he said, he spoke English very well. He said, "Now I'd like to say a few words to the students that are gathered here." So there were about 200 young men in the yeshiva. The yeshiva then was not just Chicago, it was St. Louis and Minneapolis and Indianapolis and Detroit and Cleveland. It was that was the whole, that was it. It was Echad Meir Shnai Mishpacha. And he said to us as follows. He said, "I just came from the Pope of Rome, and I gave the Pope a list of 10,000 names of Jewish children who had been sequestered in Catholic institutions during the Holocaust. And I said to him, 'Give me back the children.'" And then he paused and he said, "The Pope told me that he could not do so because any child that was brought into a Catholic institution was immediately baptized. And church law does not allow him to give children to be raised in a different faith once they were baptized. So he said, I cannot help you." And when he said that, he put his head down on the lectern and he wept. In all my life, I have never seen anybody weep like that. The whole 2,000 years poured out of him. And then he raised himself and he looked around the room at all of us. And just his face glowed, it was soaking wet, and he glowed. And he said, "I cannot do anything more for those children. But what are you going to do to rebuild the Jewish people? What are you going to do?" And later on, when all of us went to shake his hand and receive a blessing from him, so he said, I remember I was 11 or 12 years old. He said to me, "Remember what I said. Don't forget what I said." You know, so Rabbi Schacter and Rabbi Weil can share my feeling. We've been rabbis, you know, there are days in the rabbinate where we rethink the entire matter. But every time that I was shaken, I heard Rabbi Herzog in my ear, "What are you going to do?" And I think that that always is the issue. What are you going to do? Don't tell me what you're going to say. Don't tell me what you think. Don't tell me what should be done. Don't tell me advice for others. What are you going to do? So what are you going to do? I'm going to try and build the Jewish people. I'm going to build my family. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have children. I'm going to raise them. I'm going to support schools. I'm going to do something. And that is always the challenge. And it remains the challenge today, except today that we feel it even more. When we get out of this, whatever it's going to look like, we're going to have to do something. And it's always done by people. And sometimes it's done by a few people. You know, a man once said that it takes all kinds of people to make this world, and I'm glad I'm not one of them. But we are all one of them. And we're the main one. And the Mesilas Yesharim, the Ramchal begins, what am I doing here? I'm here to do something. And everyone in their own way, at the kitchen table, in the synagogue, in the business world, wherever one finds oneself, there will always be something to do. And I think that really is a message that all of us should incorporate in our thinking and in our behavior. Rabbi Weil, by the way, I didn't mean, God forbid, to be disrespectful and launch into my brilliant words without acknowledging you. But I know Rabbi Weil from Detroit, from Los Angeles. We've been through the wars together. And it really is an honor to be here with you today as well. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Rabbi Wein and Rabbi Schacter, if I could ask each of you, and you've heard this maybe in different language than I have, but we know that many of our people financially are not going to be in the same place. The economy is not going to rebound immediately. And who's going to be hit the worst? The local communities, the local schools, yeshivas. Right now, the cost of education, many yeshivas are barely just getting by. If you could speak wearing your hat as former pulpit rabbis and being someone who's there for us who are in the trenches, in the local communities, what do you say to lay leaders, to rabbis, in terms of whether it's refocusing our charitable giving, in terms of our responsibilities to the children, to the future of our communities? Could you speak to that?
Rabbi Wein.
You know, this program is being sponsored by the Orthodox Union, which is an organization of synagogues. So it would be not so gracious of me, but I think, as I remember American Jewry when I grew up, we had a tremendous amount of Orthodox synagogues. And it didn't do any good. It didn't raise another generation. Many of them were hijacked into the conservatives who took it over, building and booty. And it was only through the day school movement, the yeshivas, the chinuch, that the Jewish world was rebuilt. And I think that pretty much holds now too. So when you say to redirect what? There are so many, there's such a plethora of causes, all of which are valid. But the the future of the Jewish people lies in Jewish education and in educating Jewish children. I find the tuition rates to be unconscionable, but there are various reasons why that is. But the schools are the first priority. They are the first priority. Because Imein Gedoyim, Imein Tioshim. If there won't be children that are educated in Torah and mitzvahs, then Im Hashem lo yivne bayis shovam lubono bo. And all the buildings in the world will not save us. So I think that has to be one priority. The second priority, if I may be so bold, is that to a great extent the future of Klal Yisrael is Eretz Yisrael. Whether we, and this is not to discount America and Jewry, and not to discount the exile and all of the good things. But all the Nevi'im told us that this was going to happen. We just didn't believe it. But it has happened. And we have to build Eretz Yisrael. We have to build the state of Israel. It has become much more traditional over 75 years. It will continue to be so. And we have to see ourselves in that light. And I think that an emphasis has to be placed on that. So none of this is really nice of me to do on an OU broadcast in America. But, you know, when you get to be an old man, you can say what you want to say. And I think that those are two priorities that we have to really have in mind, because I think that that's where the future really lies.
Rabbi Schacter.
I appreciate the question, and I would say the following. I would say, Rabbi Weil, you point to a whole list of really significant, overwhelming challenges that we're facing now, that we faced before, but now Corona, post-Corona highlight for us. And if one focuses on the question, there's a sense of despair. Me'ayin yavo Ezri, how can I crawl out of this? It's so overwhelming. It's so huge. I would not say that the tuition is unconscionable. I wouldn't quite say that. I know that there are many mechanchem and many board of directors of schools who work very, very hard to be reasonable. And if tuition is high, it's high for a reason. And I know that all of them are working to do whatever they can to try to help. But the problems are serious, and the problems are real, and the problems are significant. I don't know what the answer is. Rabbi Wein mentioned earlier, I'm not a prophet. I don't know what's going to be. But I would like to respond to this question by underscoring the fact that there is an answer, and that there will be an answer. We may not know now what it is. We're not yet wise enough, and we haven't yet lived through enough to know exactly what that answer will look like to all of the issues, Rabbi Weil, that you raised. But I feel that we need to have a sense of confidence that we will be in a position to be able to find the answer. I draw your attention to a text that I've referred to a few times in the last couple of weeks. It's the fourth parak in Malachim Beis. The fourth parak of Malachim Beis, it's the Haftorah for Parshas Vayera. V'isha achas min ishei b'nei hanaviyim tzok el Elisha lemor, avdacha ishi meis v'ati yodati. My husband died, you know, he was an Erlich Yid, and now v'hanoshe bolo kachas eshnei yoladai la'avodim. And now the debtor, person to whom I owe money, is going to come and take my kids away. And listen to what he says. V'yomer eleh Elisha ma e'eseh lach. Hagidi li ma yesh lach babayis. Tell me, what is it that you have at home? So she says, well, I have a little oil. So he says, go outside, go to your neighbors, get vessels. You'll take the oil. There'll be a miracle. More oil will pour into the vessels. You'll sell that oil. You'll have money. You'll be able to give it to the person who is oppressing you, and your kids will be free. What does Elisha say to this woman? What does Elisha not say to this woman? He does not say, Yesh lach babayis. He does not say, do you have anything at home? That's not what he says. He says, what do you have at home? Because I know you have something at home. I know you have in your home the answer to this question. I know that you have in your home the capacity to try to help you get out of the predicament in which you are now finding yourself. It's not, do you have anything? You have it. The only question is, what is it? What is it that you have? And then she says, and then he tells her what to do. We have babayis. We have babayis, the kayach to be able to persevere. We have in our bottom the strength, the wherewithal, the resources, the intellectual resources, the emotional. We have it, but we need to access it. It's hard now. It's difficult now. We're facing huge challenges now. But I think to answer your question, Rabbi Weil, if we know that we have the koyach, that is already more than halfway home. If we know that we can do it, we're going to be able to do it. We've seen worse. We've seen other challenges. Baruch Hashem, we've survived. Klal Yisrael is here. Ruach Yisrael, Saba, is still beating. We will figure this out. I don't know yet exactly. This policy, that policy, I don't know. I don't know. But I do know that I will know. And I think that to me is the most important consideration. I want to add, if I may, one more story. Rabbi Wein, it was so touching and so beautiful. And I'm jealous that you had the opportunity in 1946 to listen and to hear Rav Herzog. Many years ago, I fell in love with Rav Herzog. Many years ago, maybe 20 years ago, and I thought he wasn't getting the proper respect that he was due. One point I was toying with writing a book about Rav Herzog. I went to the archives of Rav Herzog. They're in Heichal Shlomo on the 4th floor. Right. There's a replica of his office in Heichal Shlomo on the 4th floor, where they have all of his files, and it was a balagan atzum. A balagan atzum. And there are 20,000 pieces of paper strewn around, and I sat there for days to be able to try to figure this out, and I come across a piece of paper where he writes the following story. He writes the following story that he went to the Pope, and he said to the Pope, where are the Yiddish Kinderlach? And the Pope said, I can't give them to you. So what he did was, he writes, I went before I left Europe. I went to the monasteries, and I walked in, and I asked the Mother Superior. He said, I did it in dozens of monasteries. Maybe there's some Jewish children here. And she said, no, we don't have Jewish children. So he said, okay. He waited till lunchtime. He walked in, they're all sitting in the lunchroom. And he walks into the middle of the room. You knew Rabbi Wein what he looked like. A short guy with a cylinder, with a beautiful beard, impeccable bekisha. He walks into the middle of the room and he says, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. He screams out Shema Yisrael, and inevitably he writes in this dog-eared document that I found in the archives. Inevitably, Kinderlich run over to him. Tata, Zayda. They heard Shema Yisrael. They heard those words. These are the words that we need to hear. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. Those words were recited in horrific circumstances. Al Kiddush Hashem. Now we need to recite them from strength. Hear, Yisrael, this is what the children of Yaakov said. The Gemara in Psachim around his deathbed. Shema Yisrael, our father Yisrael. Shema Yisrael Avinu. Don't you worry. There's Nitzchias, there's a Kiyum. Hashem Elokeinu. Hashem Echad. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what it's going to look but I know it will be there. And I know that I have babayis somewhere, yet to be uncovered, yet to be discovered, yet to be identified. I have somewhere the kayach, the oil, the light that is going to shine in a future that a Mirza Hashem will assure the nitzchias of the Jewish people.
Can I just add to your Elisha story an insight that I heard from my Rabbeinu? She is pouring oil, right? He told her, go out and borrow as many vessels as you can. So she did so. She went to her neighbors and she borrowed. She figured she's got that. And the oil keeps on coming. And she is so excited. He told her, Elisha told her, Al tamiti. Don't be cheap about this. Right? Go get more. And then she said to her sons, you know, bring some more kalim. The oil's still flowing. And they said, ain't no keli, there are no more. And then the oil stopped. We're never short of oil, we're short of kalim. We're never short of what we can accomplish, we're short of people to accomplish it. And that really is the Tzav HaShah. That's what we have to try and do. And I can't express strongly enough how your message is really the one that we should hear.
Thank you.
Rabbi Wein, Rabbi Schacter, thank you. Really, thank you for opening up in giving us your insights, sharing with us, and for us to be able to listen to this dialogue, to hear two of our thoughtful shepherds, the most thoughtful shepherds that we have, share with each other and share with us. We're profoundly grateful. To each of you, your role in building diaspora Jewry, your role, Rabbi Wein, in building the Jewry of the future of the Jewish nation, that being in Israel. We're also profoundly grateful that we have you not only as shepherds, but as builders. God bless both of you. And it was an honor for us at the OU family to hear from you, to learn from you. And thank you for giving of your time, your heart, and your insights to all of us.
Thank you for having us. Rabbi Wein, a big yeshikayach, a pleasure to be with you. You should be gesinnt and stark and continue tremendous teiches. It's doch noch a yinge man. Mirza Hashem, you should have many.
Don't rub it in. Don't rub it in.
I listen. I have such respect for you for decades. You should continue in Mirza Hashem to be gesinnt.
Whatever happened to the book on Rabbi Akiva?
It's on its way. It's on its way.
It's
almost done.
Oh, please.
I'll send you a copy. Mirza Hashem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be well. Hatzlacha Rabbah. Be well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Wein. Be well. Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Weil.
Rabbi Weil, be matzliach and everything.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Don't let them get you down.
Yeah. We're gonna keep swinging, Rabbi.
Okay, we're counting on you, Rabbi Weil.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Naftali,
be well. Thank you, Kolto. Be well.
You want to come on in?
I don't want to interrupt this. Let's just keep it going.
We need you too, Naftali. Keep on going. You're great. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you so much, Tara. Unbelievable panel for an incredibly informative and fascinating conversation. Please note, if you're aware of anyone who may have missed today's program, please inform them and let them know it will be available online at together.ou.org, together.ou.org, and it can be watched on demand at any time. Thank you once again, Rabbi Wein, Rabbi Dr. Schacter, and Rabbi Weil, and all of you at home for joining us today. And with that, we hope and pray that all of our collective efforts for safety, strength, and a refuah for all of those in need will be answered l'tova. And may the Rabboni Shalom please speedily bring an end to these days of concern and uncertainty. Stay strong, hopeful, and optimistic, wishing everyone a wonderful, healthy, and safe day. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Annie.